Of us, how is beingness here for you right now? How is beingness here? How do you know it? Is it through connection? Is it through peace? Is it a stillness? Is it a joy? How is beingness here? How is it most pronounced in you right now? As we all notice that, just what part is here? Like for me, there was a sense of kind of, kind of rushing. I was like, I got distracted. It's like, oh my God, I'm got to rush, get to come to the party. And then there was a sense of, yeah, what part is here for you? Is it a healer part? The part that's, oh, really want to heal? But is it it's an achiever part that wants more peace? Is it a critic part? I have a part right now that's like, Sid, you're a little off. You haven't settled yet. A little bit of just bubbliness going on. What part is loudest for you? Just go around and hear those two things from each of us. And then out of that, we'll get to have this hour and a half journey. And let me, you know what, let me do my housekeeping real quick since we already closed the room. Housekeeping is just as you've heard or read that I'm not a psychotherapist. This is not the EIFS of psychotherapy. These are friends and colleagues coming together. Everyone's good being responsible for their own journeys. If I could get a thumbs up from you. Thank you. And then lastly, I'm recording this, but just as I always share, only my image of the video is being recorded. However, and would be shared, but the audio of everyone is being recorded. So please listen to your protectors. And also, this is quite different from other groups in that we don't go into the story of the parts. Instead, we just hear what the parts are longing for, and we help our parts find that that's here and now. So if you're good with that, that this might be shared publicly, if I could get a thumbs up from you, a thumbs up from everyone on that. Thank you. So let's go around and Milo, can we start with you?
Absolutely. Hello. Hmm. So, I can relate to what you just shared. Sid, I feel I just transitioned from, working on the website and just sitting down here, sort of a little bit, not as much in a rush, but certainly, yeah, unsettled, I think is the word. Just still landing in this chair. And the loudest or the most present quality of self is an okayness with that, like a pervasive okayness and peace and stillness underneath that.
There's this peace and okayness. And the part that's just kind of transitioning, what's that like? Is it one like, oh, I need to settle more, or I feel like a critic that I'm a little off center? What's that? What's the voice?
Yeah, no, it's not even as much. I wouldn't label it there's not quite a tangible longing in that. There's just like a energetic sense of sort of still catching my breath, metaphorically speaking, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Hmm. Would it be catching the breath? We wants to find its balance.
Yeah, good question.
And for everyone, when we hear Milo describe this part that just wants to that's just kind of shit in transition, what is that? What's that for you? What kind of part is that for you? See if we can all find this. and notice the background, this okayness and peace that's there at the same time. How do you relate to that in your system? So what do you got, Milo? Anything else on that part?
So, quite literally, I sort of realized what time it is and then sort of rushed to the toilet and back, sitting down in my chair. So I can sort of just feel my elevated pulse. It's very physical, sort of energetic. I just
Mm,
feel unsettled in that sense. But there is, yeah, again, it's okay. So there's not really like a longing for settling. It's okay that I feel this now and
yeah.
I know that I will settle. Um, yeah. Yeah, I think
Thank you.
that's it's not
Good,
really a loud
good,
longing. Yeah,
good, excellent. So how about for all of us? An unsettledness. For Milo, it's not really so much a burden unsettledness, it's just an unsettledness. It's not a problem. How is your system when unsettledness is here? Can it be here? Or do you notice another part comes up that says, okay, we need to do something about this part. We need to find settledness. We need to find peace. So this is an exploration of capacity, what we call the eighth tipping point in effortless IFS, just recognizing where we are with capacity. Thanks, Milo.
thank you.
This is lovely. All right, Abby, let's talk about shirts. What's going on for you?
Um, you're making me laugh because the shirts part is actually the part that's most prevalent today. Like I'm just really enjoying seeing familiar faces, and there's like a part that wants to say, "Oh, there's Inga's face. I know Inga's face." And it's a like a chatty social part that wants to know a little bit more and talk about shirts, and it's light and
Oh,
busy.
what does it find in that? Is there's like a sense of connection, comfort, familiarity, enjoyment? What does it find in that the chatty social part?
It's kind of joyful, irrepressible part. It's maybe a little part as well. When I was little, people used to say, "You're so talkative," she's so chatty. Didn't
Oh,
stay, but that little part of me is still.
mm,
Maybe
beautiful.
she's here now.
We just invite everyone in as we this part of Abby's. How is that? How do you know that part in you? In kind of England English, like chatty, irrepressible, joyful. Like, what is that for you? That that just like, oh, it's Inca's here. Oh, people I know and Milo. It's like this chatty enjoy. What's that like for in your system? And then is there a sense of like a causeless quality of self that just is here in the midst of that, or is that joy maybe an aspect of the beingness that's here?
um, I think the joy feels essential and it's kind of being expressed through that part. But actually, the kind of the underneath bit is quite big and quiet in contrast to that. I have this amazing view from my window. It's huge, and there are days where it's huge and I'm smaller, and then other days where it's huge and I'm huge, and it's all part of a quiet, slowly moving vastness that is underneath the kind of fizzy, chatty bits.
Oh, nice. In this big, this vastness, does there seem to be a flavor of joy in that kind of causeless joy, or is it more just the quiet vastness?
It's quiet, and there is joy woven in, but it's just one thread, so it's not as this.
Wonderful. Oh, great. Thank you, Abby. For all of us, as we hear Abby describe how beingness is showing up for her, is this about Abby or is it also about us? But she's describing this vastness, this quiet vastness. Is this a quality of herself or is it also a flavor of the shared beingness, this shared self? What's most like that for you, what Abby's describing? Quiet vastness. And whatever you touch, how do you know it's here? What's the somatic experience of it? Does something relax when there's a quiet vastness here? What happens? Inga, where are you going to take us today?
I have several parts up, and it's hard to tell which one is the loudest. Um, my um, my narrator is quite loud today, and still up. The part that tries to figure out what to say and how to make sense of things, and basically chatting to an imaginary person all the time, trying to explain how things work. So that is probably the loudest part. There's also fear and there's also nausea. But I think the narrator is really the loudest one.
Let me pause for just a minute with this. When we all hear about Inga's narrator, do you use the same word inside of you? Is it your narrator, or is it like a commentator? Is it an analyzer? Is it an understanding part? What's that voice? How do you identify that voice inside of you as you hear Inga describe this? And then here's a question for all of us. What does that part get through it making sense of? How to make sense of what's going on, how to understand what's going on. What does it get from that? Does peace come if I understand this, if I put the puzzle together, if it all makes sense, if we find a system, a structure for making sense of what's here? Or if there's an organization, however it works in your system, like is it more like organizing, puzzle, structure? What does that part do in your system? Is it like, finally the puzzle's coming together, I can see it, or I can understand something? What happens? Is there relief that is found there? Is there a sense of peace? Is there a sense of understanding? And so and can you find that it's kind of wanting something, this narrator, this understanding part, that it might even be grasping for something to be able to make sense of? And what is it that it's grasping for in you? And Inga, what do you find? This narrator what's it wanting?
It wants safety. It wants safety and connection. It wants to make sure that I'm okay when I'm around other people. So it wants to make sure that I'm safe, say the right thing, and that so it's longing for safety, connection, to be loved.
Thank you. When we all hear that, can we relate to a part in our system that does the same thing? Especially when, for some of us, we don't know everybody here. And there's a sense of, wow, is this going to be safe? The connection, how do I get that? How do I take care of myself? And then one place we go in effortless IFS is we hear the longing for the place of compassion. Like when we hear Inga, aren't we all touched? It's like, I know that part. And don't we see the preciousness of this part of hers that's looking to do this? And we see that in her. And then here's my question for all of us. What's most like that which is here now, what is being longed for? And Inga, it's safety, connection, taking care of myself, love. What's most like that which is intrinsic in our very being? of what's being longed for? Can you touch safety here now? Is there safety here? Is there connection here? Is there love here? Is there okayness here? As Milo was speaking of this okayness, what can you find here? And Inga, what do you find as the background today? What's the beingness?
It's peace. It's a very spacious and vast peace and okayness. It feels quite stable. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And for all of us, for Inga, for your parts, and for all of us, can our parts get a taste of what's here? Like in Inga's system, wow, there's this vast, spacious peace and okayness. Can our parts that are looking for safety and okayness, can they taste that some of that is here now in you? Like we can notice it in Inga's system, in you. Can your system taste that? Or if you're not aware of parts right now, forget the parts. Let me just ask you, can you taste it? Can you taste that there's okayness, peace, safety, presence, whatever is here for you? Can you taste that? What's that like to be in this? See? Hey, Sabrina, it's nice to see you. What's here for you today? Oops, you're muted. Can't hear. Let's see. No, there we
Sorry,
go.
it took me a while to figure out how to turn off my mic, turn on my mic. It's good to see you, Sid.
Hey, Sabrina. That's everyone. This is my friend from Colorado.
Yeah, it's been a while. So let's see. I'm in this place where somebody posted, well, there's a couple of things. I had a medicine journey and I found this part of me that has a compulsivity to find the shadow. And so I've been really attending to that. And then somebody posted a Rumi quote a couple of days ago. And the first line is, "Sometimes I forget that I was created for joy." And so I've been having this joy practice. Part of my history is around sort of things being a burden, that over adultification. So I've been looking at everything in my life from this perspective of like, I have a right to take joy in everything. So I'm sitting in line right now for the food bank because I do this for the seniors in my community once a month. And I'm like, I get to do this. I have the time to do this. And so that part of me who is, who has this compulsivity to look at the shadow, right? Sort of call up all my shadow and pained parts. It's in this place of just like, it's so grateful to me that for a practice. And so, so there's a sweetness that I have right now. And also in this sweetness, there's also, as people are providing their shares, like when they're talking about, so for you, Ingo, when you talked about the narrator, I'm like, oh, I have a narrator part, right? And the impulse of that recognition to pull that narrator part up to the front, right, rather than this joy place. And so the practice of like recognizing how that wants to pull to the front, and then offering that part like, okay, you can do that, or you can come hang out and enjoy with us, right? It's a choice. And so it's just, I'm in this like sweet place of just watery-eyed gratitude for where I am right now. And I know it will change, like I will have my chaos moments again, but for right now it's really precious.
Beautiful. I want to include everyone in this, because if anybody's kind of looking back, it's like, wow, this is cool. We have Sabrina, who's a kind of an EIFS trainer out in the world, and we've got her with us in her car doing service and talking about all of this. that this is kind of about her system. I'm asking, how do you find what she just shared in you? Because it goes to the very core of what we're playing with here. The quality of our very nature, these qualities of our beingness. And Sabrina's, she's focused on joy. She's like knowing the joy that's here. It's making her cry, this joy that is here as her very nature. It's like, oh, it's such a break because I'm usually doing the work. I'm looking at the shadows. I'm bringing the parts to the forefront. But for a moment, it's like, wait a minute, I get to just be in the joy that's here. I get to rest in this nature of what I am. And so can we all relate to sometimes the tension between that, just resting back there, and then the parts, like say it's the narrator part, or Sabrina was describing one that she describes as compulsive, that always looks at the shadows. I want to do my work. I want to do more healing. Can we all find that tension inside of us? Notice how that plays inside of you, that tension. Notice how that plays. And maybe there's a manager that has ideas about it. It's like, okay, we should do it this way now. Or, okay, we want to focus more on the background, the beingness. How can you find a real aliveness in what she just shared in your system? Anything else you'd like to share, Sabrina?
No, I'm good. Except
Thank
that I'm
you.
super joyful that I get to spend this time with all of you new beings to me and not so new beings to me. So
Yay. Yay. Wonderful. Thank you.
And are you on a computer? Can you turn off my mic? I have a hard time finding it.
I can. Ta-da. Mute. Ta-da. I have, before we go to Evan, as we're talking about the two, this beingness and the parts, I'd like to just read 5 lines from Rumi that most of you have heard me read before. Just notice how this plays for you. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival, the joy, the depression, a meanness. Welcome and entertain them all, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. Being human is a guest house. Who are your guests right now, and what's the sense of the guest house, the beingness, the space? Evan, what are you finding?
Well, today I know myself as the peace and love of the universe. This stream of feels like a river of love coming through the center of my being in my heart, and knowing myself as that, which is quite wonderful. And
But you gotta wait, we gotta let everybody get a taste of that. This
okay.
river of love through his beingness and his heart. Knowing yourself as the peace and love of the universe. How does that play for each of us, what Evan's offering us? It's kind of alive in his system as the way this beingness is expressing. The river of peace and love. Okay, please continue, Evan.
When I first got on, this is the first time I've been here, so there was a little bit of a part that was a little bit of feeling of fear of what someone else going to think, but that dissipated quickly. And what's really there is, this morning I spent a lot of time with 2 parts, and there's just echoes of that are still pretty strong. There's this strong self-disgust that I've really been sitting with and watching and being with. And then there's this tremendous fear underneath. It's like the disgust is like this protection mechanism for the for this tremendous fear. So those are really kind of echoing strongly. That's really what I'm most present to.
Nice. Let's see about that for all of us. Self-disgust as a protective mechanism. How do we relate to that? Often in IFS, we'll use the term critic, a critic for it, a critic. But this might be it. But the self-disgust, it's completely, for some of us, it might be the voice of the critic. But how's that different? Self-disgust in your system. How do you know that? The voice of self-disgust. Flavor of that for all of us. This isn't just Evans just touching on a chord, this human chord, something that we all share. What's your version of that? And maybe it's just a should. You should have done something different. Like, gosh, you've really messed up. Self-disgust. But in Evan's system, it's protecting from a tremendous fear. What is your critic or disgust? What is it protecting you from? What fear is there that it's protecting you from? But see if you can look without doing anything, because in Effortless IFS, we don't really use our spiritual achiever to go and like, okay, I'll go into that fear. Let's go into the heart of that fear and see what that is, because that can be really scary. We don't do that. We're just, but if you can notice fear, and anything else you'd like to share about that, Evan?
Yeah. Just you talking about it, just touching that fear, a little bit more. Hopefully this isn't getting too much into story, but my father was a violent guy and I grew up very afraid, and that it's really more now in the present that people are going to not like me. And I'm terrified of that being thrown away. And to be honest, even, it's that somehow that part really feels like it's going to die, if it gets rejected.
So it's just that. Something's going to die, a part's going to die if it gets rejected. We can all relate to the fear of rejection, right? Because this love of connection, this love of belonging, this love of community, this joy that Abby was describing, connecting and being with everybody, the joy that Sabrina was sharing. And then the sense of what is rejection for you? And what is the innocent confusion in our system about what rejection might really be? It's going to be death, or it's worse than death. It's this. It's just to notice that fear. If we can do this at the same time, be aware of the fear that's there, and also be aware of, because that's just a guest in our guest house, this fear. Maybe it's a very young one. And then there's this house, this space, this beingness, this river of peace and love, this okayness. Notice if we can all taste that. Does our system have the capacity to be aware of the fear of rejection, perhaps, as well as this ever-present okayness that Milo was pointing to, and Inga points to, or maybe it's more like peace and love that Evan spoke, pointing to. Just notice that. And last question, is it okay that we have, to use Evan's word, a tremendous fear in our system? Is it okay that there's tremendous fear? And it might be this, it could be the fear of rejection, or it could be whatever the tremendous fear is. We're not going into it, but is it okay that it's there? Is there capacity? Is there space as this river of love, as this okayness, as this peace? Is it okay that tremendous fear is here? And also to notice that often it's not okay. That's a little too much right now. And that's when we have these wonderful firefighters that come in, these superheroes that come in and say, okay, time to go do something else. Time to go do something else. Or time to, we don't need to do this right now. We get to go eat pizza. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Evan, for taking us on there to the depths of this. Hey, Wolf, what's going down? Way down under.
Well, just that juxtaposition now that I heard of you of tremendous fear or we can go and eat pizza. That was so weird. I have a lot of joy and surprise in this moment, really. And overall, I'm sitting here. I take a few notes of those states that you're mentioning, and I notice in my inner space, I have a lot of joy. It's like 4:30 a.m. and curiously, I didn't have much sleep, and there's no inner response. I feel wide awake, having my cup of tea and the espresso, and I feel really spacious underneath, very joyous, and I'm noticing those foreground narrative notions from you, and I notice, yes, I remember each one of these states, and there isn't much of that in me right now. It's, the one when I'm sitting at my desk here, I notice, there's a bit of work that I haven't done and a bit of chaos on the desk. And for some odd reason, I'm not very touched by all of that. I'm feeling joyous and wide awake.
Okay, let me invite everyone into this. Let me invite everyone into what Wolf's describing. Let's just see, how does that translate for you? What is the gift? What gift are you receiving from Wolf right now? What gift are you receiving from what he's sharing? As he's describing, well, there's just joy and spaciousness here. Just this okayness, but it doesn't, but wait a minute, I didn't get much sleep. And when I look around, I can notice, well, there are things that need to be done, but none of it's grabbing him. Sometimes we speak of parts that are unburdened parts that don't have a charge, or thoughts that just come, but they don't grab us. It's like, how can you relate to what Wolf is describing? The sense of, well, there's just this spacious joy here. And it's not that I'm not aware of the guests or the thoughts, feelings, and sensations or parts that are here. Like I'm noticing there's something that, hey, maybe there's some work to do and all of this. But there's a lightness of being that's just kind of pervading it all.
Yeah. The lightness of being, that's a very apt descriptor. Thank you. Yeah, most helpful. And there's also this, looking at this small screen of the laptop here and seeing your image. And there's this tremendous ease for a while now for me to see your expression and feel into it and have a sense of a peculiar sweetness I see in your expression and a slight sense of question in your eye band and warmth at the same time. And I'm just like really enjoying that experience of being able to feel into expression, and sometimes the landscape here and the sea.
Wonderful.
And it's just,
Let me ask, let's just bring this to everyone. The sense of, how are we supporting each other in this today? It's like Dick Schwartz speaks of the great gift of being together in community. And we have the 8 of us here, 7 of us with you right now. It's like just, however, my image is serving Wolf, but it's really just receiving the gifts from each of us as we share and how are we availing ourselves of this, of Wolf right now, looking out over the landscape, being on a kind of completely other side of the planet for most of us. In this openness and what we're experiencing in him, or what we experience in Evan. I mean, my gosh, the river of peace and love that's running through. Or Sabrina's the joy, or Milo's and Inga's the sense of okayness, or Abby's this irrepressible joyfulness. How does that support our system? Like, we're not doing this alone. How does it support you in this? Thank you, Wolf. Thank you for the gift of you this morning.
Thank you, Sid, for your gift of having this little illustrious circle happening in this very odd disembodied and yet embodied online experience.
Yay.
Thank you so much.
Yay.
Yeah.
Disembodied yet embodied for all of us. Like, is this for all of us, even though we're like sitting in our rooms or our cars? Like for me, it's very much like we're in a room together. There's an intimacy. Notice, again, what are you availing yourself of? What are you accepting that's here? How intimate are you with this experience? Elizabeth, what do you have for us today?
I see the quality and aspect of beingness is this kind of sensing, knowing that there's something here in this group being done that's important in my journey to learn, to experience, and I don't even know exactly what that is, but I feel I've been sent here to be mentored in this.
And what do you what resonates? Like, let's say it's a tuning fork. Elizabeth's got her tuning fork here. And we've had all these beautiful qualities of beingness that have been shared here amongst us. Which one seems to be the one that resonates your tuning fork the most? Is it like the peace and love, the joy, the okayness, the connectedness? What's resonating most for you?
It feels like the radical acceptance of every part invited into the guest house. The beingness and that holding the beingness and the heart needing, having a need, both. The beingness and the guest is the guest house.
How about that? I'm going to invite everyone into Elizabeth's kind of profound sharing, the radical acceptance of every part, of every arising, of every guest, radical acceptance. And at first we might be like, yeah, I have a part that can accept. Like sometimes it's a therapist part that accepts and does that. But then what we're really looking for is this radical acceptance as a quality of your nature. Notice for all of us, this beingness is a resistance and preference in beingness, or beingness, is it acceptance of what is? Is it what Elizabeth is pointing to, this radical acceptance of everything that arises within us? Can you touch that? And then she also points to something so beautiful. It's like there's both this beingness and there's the parts. There's our precious expressions of our humanity, of these parts. And like, what's it like for our parts, for everything that arrives, for how life moves in us to be welcomed? It's like for the space of you to be something that includes all the humanity that moves within you. What else would you like to share about that, Elizabeth? Anything else?
Like, I got a part that really has to pee right now.
Yeah. Evan says, "Yay!"
And I'm new. I don't know. Like, I guess I just leave my camera on. Eventually, that part's gonna be needing to be attended to.
Yes.
Even though I'm trying to like.
I guess just mute yourself. And
Yes.
And yeah, but isn't that lovely? Because often we're like, you're like, oh, I have a part that needs to pee. I need to pee. I'm like, wow, is that okay too? Is that welcome too? Or for some of us, maybe I have a depressed part, or I have an embarrassed or an ashamed part. I mean, it's all the same. They're all our precious parts. And can we find, like what Elizabeth's showing us, this joy that just, I have a part that needs to pee, and never, it's like, I don't know how to do this, and being in the group. It's like all of that gets to be, it's like the space of welcoming. That's really what we're exploring. Like our friend Milo, who does the website with me, and he's like, so we have to have a tagline, a little line that goes with effortless EIFS. And what we came up with was celebrating everything. And that's really what it's like I wanted to be longer. Milo wouldn't let me do that. He's like, oh, that's what you got. But it's like, Evan likes that. But like celebrating everything is really like welcoming everything that arises in us. And then last thing, here's a question for all of you. As we all start doing that more, as we notice more and more is being welcomed in us, celebrated in us, you get to experience almost like the Disney magic of as that's happening, and then you look out at your friends or you look out at people who really bothered you, and you notice that something's changed, that there is more acceptance and appreciation of them and their parts. Elizabeth, would you like to take, we're going to transition in a minute to the dive. Would you like to take go do your pee in the meantime? Great. And while Elizabeth is taking her pee break, there was just tons of things coming up here. And before we take our dive, is there something bubbling here? Who's got something bubbling for us?
I can share about a tired part that came up. The sort of part that just wants to drift off into sleep. And I had a very peculiar experience of just allowing that part as well, because, well, heck, welcome everything, right? So I thought, I don't want to be hypocritical here, like, okay, let's welcome that. And I experimented with allowing rather than the sort of usual, resisting, like we're in a workshop or, we're in a classroom or whatever. I recognize this from, like, no, we need to stay awake. And then I thought, well, what if that's okay, actually? And I was just aware of the tiredness and even the drifting into sleep wouldn't eclipse that awareness. That was, yeah.
Wow. It was capacity space. Even the experience of drifting into sleep. And that doesn't block the awareness. Like, hey, we can go pee, we can be sad, we can be depressed, we can be angry, perhaps all of that. Anything else, Milo?
No, there's a part that's trying to make sense of sort of what happened, and what it came up with is the blending and the unblending. So it felt like because I allowed and stopped resisting the tired part, I could unblend from it, and then that part could sort of do its business, sort of falling into sleep, but I stayed awake as the consciousness, so that was pretty wild. Yeah.
Pretty wild. Well, let's dive in. Let's dive in together. And this will be just a little different flavor dive today, but a dive. My invitation is going to be for each of us again to find, and you can close your eyes if that helps or keep them open as we explore together. What's the loudest quality of beingness again for you that's here now? What's the loudest quality of this beingness? Like Elizabeth's, a sense of this acceptance is here. What Milo was just pointing to, this allowing. Or is it more like Sabrina's, the joy that's here? It's just this joy. Abby's okayness. What's the loudest quality of beingness that's here now? Like Evan's peace and love. Loudest quality of beingness. And how do you know that it's here? How do you know it? we looked at the somatic experience or our bodies, how do we know that this quality of beingness is here? Does our breath change? Does our posture change when peace is here, when okayness is here, when acceptance is here? Does something open up when there's allowing and acceptance? Does something change when there's joy here? Does the experience of the body, the vibration that we experience as the body, does that change? How do we know this? How do we know this? When you are resting as this quality of beingness, what about the space around you? Does anything change as far as your awareness of the space around you or how it's known when there's allowance, acceptance, joy, peace, love, okayness? And then what about objects? What about the tree outside your home? What about the sky? We're looking for indicators of this. We're looking so that we can know this more viscerally, this quality of beingness. When there is, Elizabeth's radical acceptance, how do we know it's here? There could be thoughts that arise, could be certain feelings arise. When joy is here, how do we know joy is here? Like Sid, that's such a stupid question. How do we know joy is here? How do we know joy is here? And then what we're going to do is we're just going to practice abiding as self, resting here in the midst of the parts that arise. As you're resting in this beingness or as this beingness, can this beingness pervade your body? Can it fill up your body? This, whatever quality it is, the joy, the peace, the okayness, the connectedness, the flow, the okayness. As we rest in or as this is the first view of effortless EIFS, which is just getting to know that self is always here and getting to rest as it, that sanctuary is here, home is here. And so sometimes we play, like, call it the riding the bike of being, the bike of self. You remember when you were a kid and you learned how to ride a bike? It wasn't something you understood or read about. You just had to get on the bike, and then you found balance. Oh, finally, there's balance here. The invitation is to know this beingness the same way. Something just knows it. Balance is here, okayness is here, peace is here, acceptance is here. See if you can find it and know it for yourself in that way. And just like when we were learning to ride a bike, we start to tilt, but something learns and knows balance, it self-corrects, it brings you back. But right now, as we're resting as this beingness, notice if there's like an understanding part or a narrator part or a part that's making sense of this. Oh, he's using a metaphor of a bike, and okay, and he's wanting us to know this more deeper in our body, and this could be helpful to stay here. Notice the part, like if you have a part like that, and notice that maybe it might even blend a little with that part. And when it starts to blend, it's kind of like you start to tilt a little bit on the bike, start to blend a little bit, but we catch it. Just like we learn balance on the bike, something becomes aware of, oh, there's a narrator, there's an understanding part. And it just comes back to beingness. So as we're resting here, Notice if there's any stress or anxiety or tension occurring inside of you. Is there any tension, stress, or anxiety that's here? And if so, you might find the attention start to go towards that a little bit. It just starts to tilt. Maybe it starts to blend a little bit with that, or with a part that's like, oh, I'd rather that wasn't here. And as you notice it start to tilt or blend, see if it can just self-correct and come back to the beingness. Let's just notice the beingness here now. As we're riding this bike, can you experience a fullness of it? The fullness of it pervading your body, whatever that quality or qualities are, this peace, this love, this okayness, this joy, this acceptance, this allowing. And then maybe there's a critic part that comes up, or maybe there's a voice of, I'm not sure I'm doing this right. You know, this isn't like what Milo was describing of just being this allowance, or what Wolf was describing, or Evan was describing. Maybe the critic is saying, you're not doing it right. And if you hear a voice like that, can you hear a critic? Is there a critic or any kind of should going on inside of you? Notice, is there an awareness of a should? When you hear that, does it like blend a little bit with that? It's like, oh, wow, you got a point. What Evan was describing was really beautiful. Gosh, I want more of that. You notice the critic saying you should do it differently. And can it just come back to beingness? This is also a little different. And most of the time, we work with the second view of effortless EIFS, which is a simultaneous awareness of the foreground and background. This is more playing in like Advaita Vedanta or the work of Byron Katie or so many of these paths, or even Vipassana, the sense of letting the clouds go by and coming back to self, coming back to beingness, and this discernment. We don't stop here, although today we will stop here. But the journey goes and includes all the parts and goes to the second view and third view. But right now we're just riding the bike of being. Notice how it's going. Did the understanding part come back in as Sid was saying all this stuff? It's like, oh, that makes sense, or maybe it doesn't make sense. But it was perhaps the thinking part, thinking about it. Did it start to blend a little bit with that? Did the thinking part start to blend? And so we can come back to being. And let me ask you this. Are you able to take your hands off the handlebar? Are you able to, like metaphorically, not need to control this? Can you really relax in this beingness? Does it ride? Does it balance? Does it stay on its own if you don't need a helper part? Can you really rest here effortlessly, like Milo was describing this allowance that was here? Wow, it even stayed there when he went to sleep, when the tiredness started to drift. Can you do that? Can this bike, can this beingness, can you just stay there? Or does something need to, like, well, wait a minute, I need to come back. I need to think about these parts. I need to hold my balance. I need to balance to stay here. Or does it just learn to do it on its own, hands up in the air? Does it just learn to maintain beingness, to stay here? Or do we need some helper parts that are helping us be aware of what's happening? And that's great too, just to notice that. Just like riding a bike, it got its balance. And someone asks you, how do you ride your bike? How do you balance? It's like, oh, it just happens. I know my balance. I know balance. Just like what Elizabeth was saying, there was a sense of knowing that was here for her, sense of knowing. And we know this. All right, friends, that was a nice to go on a bike ride with you. I'm curious how that was, what that was. It's like I said, that was just silly. I'm curious, and I'd love to go around and just hear what everybody's finding. And as always, what we're interested in isn't what Sid shares or we are interested in what Milo shares, but it's not about like, oh, I want mine to be like Milo's experience, or there's what we're interested in is you. We're interested in your system, what's happening in your precious system. So there's no right way to do this. It's just an exploration for all of us. And again, it also, you could be like Sid, that totally didn't work. I had a part that was like thinking about the bike riding and then it was off someplace else. And that's what we're interested in. It's like, what's happening inside of you? Milo, what's going on there?
That totally did work. I loved it. Thanks. That was such a fun exploration. And something went deeper here. So before you start talking about letting go of the handlebars, something just deepened into that into what? Yeah, into the space, for lack of a better word, that you described with the letting go of the handlebars. And there was this sense of just really resting in that, like with clarity and awakeness, but a very deep and peaceful rest. That's the best I can describe it. And then finally enough, as I was hearing you then take us on that journey and exploration of letting go of the handlebars, it felt so apt. Like I really love that metaphor, that I really felt it. But funnily enough, in that moment, a sort of understanding part start coming up to, sort of make mental notes of that, how it's all making sense. And then the yeah, the hands sort of went on the handlebars again, funnily enough. So yeah, I loved it. Thanks.
Thank you, Milo. What did you get from Milo, everyone? How did that relate to your experience, or what do we see? Sense of letting go the handlebars and the clarity, awakeness, and rest was here. Then an understanding part came in, making sense of it, and like there was a sense of holding the handlebars again. Thanks, Milo.
Thank you. Hmm.
And really, and how's this all it's relating to real life? Real life. It's like Sabrina who's in her car going to do the service. And there's a sense of the joy that's here, and there's also a sense of the parts that come up, and it's like this relationship between the riding the bike and the parts, this beingness in the parts. How is this real? Because this isn't about this hour and a half we have together every time, but it's about real life. How is this real life for you? Abby, let's talk about shirts.
I think maybe I found that a bit harder than normal. There's a part that kind of listens from here, like it's it feels like a part, and it really wanted to get involved. And then another part that kept kind of saying, well, if Sid would just be quiet, then we could do this exercise. And then the listening part would be like, no, you're supposed to be following along, follow along, you'll get something different out of it. And in retrospect, I could have worked with those parts, but I was so busy trying to be in the beingness and ignoring the parts that it was definitely in and out.
Could you find balance? Did that translate, the sense of balance as a finding a quality of beingness to rest in? Or was it more like the chatter of the parts for a lot?
I think it came and went, but it got noisier. I think it would be a really interesting thing to practice more, because it's like the difference between, I suppose, being able to access that sense of beingness when you're completely quiet and being able to access it when you're in life. And it strikes me that in those circumstances, that's practice at finding it in activity almost. I don't know that my system's quite as practiced at that.
No. Invite everyone into that. It's just this the real life reflection from Abby on this. It's like, yeah, maybe if we were quieter, it could find its balance more. But like all these words and like real life, all this activity of the parts, it's hard to rest as joy, peace, okayness in the midst of lots of commotion, perhaps a storm, lots of weather, lots of parts in us. Notice how that's real for all of us. Anything else, Abby? Thank you. And notice for any of us, if there's a sense of it would be better if if for you were like what Milo was describing. Hey, no hands. I'm resting as awakened awareness. Awesome. Or as in contrast to the experience of parts, it's like, gosh, there was just parts that were saying these things and wanted to be heard. Notice if there's something that arises in you that says one is better than the other. It's like, duh, Sid, of course it's better to be in the peace of being and to be in love and okayness. But like, just notice that that's a part. It's a part that has a preference. Notice that beingness doesn't. Being just welcomes and loves everything just the way it is. You might have a part that, again, like, oh, no hands like Milo, that's better. Just notice that it's just a part. Inga, where are you going to take us?
It's funny that you're saying that, Sid, because that was my experience. I had a part that feeling very nauseous. I had a part that was resisting that, saying, no, I want this to go away. This doesn't feel good. And another part that was noticing, well, this part that wanted to go away shouldn't be here. I want to rest as this okayness. and the truth is, there was okayness that was like, it's just not a problem, but it was almost like getting a little bit out of balance and coming back, and then into the other direction was, yeah.
And was it okay that there was a nauseous part that would kind of grab, we'd start to tilt to that or blend with that, and there was a resistant part that would come, and there was another part that kind of wanted to rest more in okayness. Is it okay that those parts were kind of maybe Abby, that Inga's bike was just kind of, it might have been really funny to watch you ride down the street, right? It's like, whoa, 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 whoa.
It was not a problem at all for the okayness. It was, I could just feel how, well, the parts are, well, you could say grabbing the handle or like, but it was a little bit in and out. But for the okayness was not a problem at all. And I want to share one thing before we got into this dive, the part that was, so my narrator that was so active today, I realized that safety and groundedness were both present, and it just stopped. It just stopped its activity. It was like, just got silent.
Wow. So let me just invite everybody into that. Remember, we were Inga's narrator part at the very beginning was like, what is it longing for? It was for safety. She described this as that part started to find safety and groundedness, that it just kind of relaxed. Can you relate to that? Can you find that what she's describing? How is that real in your system, where your parts are longing for qualities of beingness, and when they find them, something becomes perhaps saturated or gets to rest and relax? How's that real for you? Anything else, Inga?
I'll leave it there. Thank you, Sid.
Thank you. Thank you, Inga. What gifts did you receive from Inga? What did you receive? as we're exploring together, kind of the shared being. Sabrina, how was the bike ride? Oh, should I do it for you? I will. Sorry, hang on, give me just a minute.
Thank you. I do not
Oh,
have
good.
Zoom phone competence. So the first thing I
Awesome.
want to name is some housekeeping stuff is that at some point I'm going to get called in. I'll go off video, but I'll put my headphones in. So I actually had to engage in the real world while this thing was happening. I had to get out of my car and go into a building and go pee and then come back and, you know, all that stuff. So I wasn't able to participate in most of it, except for the last little bit about, you know, being on the bike and taking your hands off. I really liked that. And I was in a cognitive space for a moment with it. And then I have a mind that sometimes thinks in sort of psychedelic cartoons. And so when I was thinking about this metaphor of taking your hands off the bike, there was actually a tension in myself about like the tension of falling. And that's when my mind just took me onto this psychedelic bike ride, which was really sweet. I have no idea what relevance it has, but it was a sweet little journey.
Oh, how about that? Let me just psychedelic bike ride. When we hear Sabrina share that, what does that look like for each of us? Anything else you'd like to share about what that psychedelic bike ride?
I mean, it felt really what was not only was it visual and beautiful and funny and weird and all that stuff, but the difference between where I was at before when I was in cognitive space was there was a tension in my body. And so there was a tension around the potential of falling. Right. And so what happened in this ride was just sort of there is no potential in falling. It's just a journey. And so because I was in that space, I could ease into it. And because my practice right now is while everything is happening is coming back to joy and coming back to joy and coming back to joy, then I could be in the joyful place around it. Right. And because when I first heard it, I wasn't really in that mindful place. I was just coming back into the car. And so I was super cognitive around it. And there was these analyzing parts like, you should actually do this and practice it.
Thank you. Thank you, Sabrina. Oops. There we go. I was going to mute you because you're an echo there, and good. This is the first time we've heard this word in our group today. When Sabrina describes, it became psychedelic, and for her, what I'm hearing in that psychedelic, there was an openness. Like if we just translate that into qualities of beingness for each of us, there was an openness. Maybe there was a flow, an ease, a spaciousness. And maybe it was still tilting she was describing, but it was less dramatic. What allows that to happen for us? Is it more spaciousness? Is it more joy? What's that for you? Evan, what you got? Were you riding the bike in the river? What was going on?
That was quite tremendous for me. I really appreciated you touching on the somatic experience. For me, I don't know, it was just lucky today. I don't know, but there was it was like that energy and that sort of love at the center of my being was just kind of like an inferno, not a bad inferno, but like a good raging inferno. And it was just sending sort of waves of love throughout my body. And I just loved all the things you said. When you were talking about riding without the handlebars, it was like that inferno sort of caught my heart on fire, and my heart was just kind of just pouring out. So it was kind of like both here and here there was just this real vast openness, and even kind of touched into my head a little bit. There were certain points where I had a part that came in that, because I've been moving around a lot, and I'm like, that's probably not okay. You're not supposed to do that in this group, or, so that was there. It wasn't too loud. It didn't distract that much. And then there's a certain point, where you said become aware of the tension in your body. And I have a pretty sizable crick in my neck at the moment, that I'm sort of working with, and so I thought we were going to go into that, and it was like, no, come back here. And it was like, I don't know, it was just very there and very available for me today. And it was all doing it, and I was just along for the ride, so to speak. So for me, it was good. Very just enjoyable to be that, I guess the important thing for me in that is to be that inferno, because for so long in my life, I identified with not that. I would touch something like that, but to experience that as me, and the parts not identified with the parts as much, is just tremendous. So thank you. That was very lovely.
Gosh, thanks, Evan. Just to invite everybody into that. When you hear Evan speak of being the inferno, how does that translate to you? Is it like the aliveness? Is it the peace? Is it the spaciousness? Is it the love? What is that for you? Being that. And then he said, what about when he said, and then it felt like just going along for the ride. Going along for the ride. What do you do with that? And then notice, beingness, people often call it flow. This beingness is just in the flow. It's just this ease, this relaxation. And some people discern that with the parts, where the parts are really kind of doing and efforting. And when we're going along for the ride, does it look like we're just resting, we're abiding more as self, as beingness, going along for the ride? Then a part comes up and we blend. Oh, there's some efforting. We got to fix this. We got to do this and do that. And then we're back in this going for the ride. Anything else, Evan?
Yeah, you said there was some point where you said what word describes it, and that was the word. It was flow. It was like all that energy was flowing. It wasn't me trying to do something. It was flowing. And one other thing you said earlier, you were talking to somebody else, and you were talking about, is that okay? And I that fear that was there that I spoke about earlier, that's somehow connected to this neck thing. I had a part that was very much, no, it is definitely not okay. You know what I mean? It was very much, absolutely not. It is not okay for that to be there. So just to see this sort of incredible spectrum of experience, all the way up and down the scale is so great. And I appreciate you facilitating that. It was helpful to me.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you, Evan. But what about that Evan just spoke of? A part that came up and said, no, it's not okay. It's not okay. Do we all know that part? And it could be even Elizabeth's like, oh, it's not okay to get up and pee in the middle of the workshop. We might even have a part like that. She could have that part. I could have that part. It'd be like, okay, I gotta pee. No, it's not okay. You're facilitating the group. Don't pee. But it's like the not okay part. It's not okay that the fear is here. It's not okay to whatever, Evan, to get up during this. It's like it's the exploration is much less about what's happening than the parts that are coming up, and how we are with the parts that are saying, no, that's not okay, or the parts that are saying I should. And then and then as we explore, do we have the capacity to include that as we're riding the bike? It's like, oh, then there's that, and bending over that, and we're just coming back. And it doesn't, because then we could get another part that could come up and say, gosh, it is so bad. It could get another part. We get caught in the parts, but we just notice the parts that say, no, that's not okay. I'm not okay with that. All right, Wolf, let's go back to the sunrise.
Yeah, well, looking over to the east, I can see it very, very faintly starting to lighten up. it's still a ways away, and yet it's starting to probably another quarter of an hour, 20 minutes, and it'll become red, I imagine. Yeah, so it's coming, and I'm also noticing how find it easier with some things to follow that I'm hearing from you and from others than with others. And particularly the bike ride is very visceral. And I notice in going into the bike ride in a visceral way that the centeredness is at the heart of it. And the centeredness is something I've been practicing for a while. And that in riding with the hands off, there's always been this quality of centeredness around it, how the bike actually responds exactly from the center of the body. It's very curious. I hadn't been aware of that until you instigated this exercise. It's most surprising to notice that exercising centeredness relates totally to riding the bike without hands.
Were there parts that were, as you were writing, and even without hands, did we notice that there were some parts that would come up, like you were describing earlier, the sense of looking at your desk and like, oh, there's something I need to do, but it really didn't tilt much. It didn't take you away from your balance much. And I guess this is a question for all of us and for Wolf, that were there some parts that were like that would just be like a little slight move and then balance would come back, but were there other parts that were just like, whoa, and you'd almost like fall down? Like, to notice that with what was arising. And what about with you, Wolf? Did you find that some parts were kind of grabbing you more?
Yeah. When there is an uneven surface, particularly any bigger rocks, I would instantly notice this thing is getting up and put my hands on the handlebar. And so that's an instant fear arising and taking control of the handlebar to remain safe without coming off. And that was quite strong. And I'm not quite clear yet how that translates into moment-to-moment beingness.
Well, but just
and yet there is some aspect of that there.
Let me just include everyone in this. There's a fear. It touches a fear. That a fear gets touched for all of us. It might be Evans, this what was his word? Tremendous fear. Somehow a fear gets touched. Or we also talked about the fear of being with new friends here. It's like, is it going to be safe? It's like a fear gets touched. And then something, maybe needs to grab the handlebar or something like starts to fall. And we just notice, if we can notice the relative loudness of the parts, that some of them really get us falling, and then others are just like little deviations. Just to notice that for all of us, which ones really kind of got us a little bit. They kind of blend with them, and the others were just really barely touch us. Anything else, Wolf?
What really, what I found very freeing in a way in the session is when, oh no, I can't see the image. Some people reported having to go pee. That kind of had a freeing effect on me. Hey, it's okay to talk about stuff that's never happening in the movies. Like go to the loo. It's wonderful. There's real joy around that freedom of expression and being real with what is, and allow what is to be in whichever way it wants to be.
Beautiful.
That's been really wonderful. Yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Wolf. All right, well, let's go to our finale, which is our friend Elizabeth, and see what she has for us now. And just for all of us, as we move towards closure here, just notice what's happening in your system. Notice that there might be some parts that come up. There might be some tired parts, like Milo was speaking of tiredness. There might be like, gosh, I can't, your understanding part might be like, gosh, I can't take another thing in. I'm trying to make sense of everything so far. Or it just, some exhaustion. This was a lot. Just see if we can notice those parts and if there's space for those to be here as well without making them wrong. It's space for like, okay, maybe I'm just going to check out at this point. Whatever's there, just to notice what's there and see if, just be aware of that and then be aware of our bike. Here we are, the beingness. Elizabeth, what you got? Bring it all together for us.
Okay, so riding the bike of beingness, or being with the bike of beingness. I definitely experience times where I need some training wheels to stay with beingness. And for me, the training wheels would be like a mantra, or thinking about imagining my higher power in my mind's eye, or a beloved animal that's been in my life helps me stay kind of training wheels. But there are other times when I'm riding the bike of beingness where I can let go and I am in the beingness without my hand on the handlebars. Like if I'm outside on our farm with the animals, not all the time, but a lot of the time, like the rescue kitties, and they're so cute and sweet, and like I'm just picking them up and loving them, and then they're just beingness.
Yes.
Or in the garden, or things are going up good with the tractor, there's just beingness.
Hang on, Elizabeth, let me include everybody in this. It's like, what are your training wheels that are helpful for you? And this is an effortless IFS is meant to complement our active practices and work with them. And so we have lots of different spiritual practice, like Elizabeth said, the mantra practice, focusing on a mantra, or the practice, you could, it's funny to call it a spiritual practice, but like being with our pets, being with the cats, being with the pet, or being with a partner, or being with a child. What is it? What are the training wheels that that kind of help you stay connected to beingness? Or is it for some, maybe it's just silence, like Abby was saying, like, gosh, if Sid would just like be silent for a few minutes, maybe everything would be okay. Silence. Like what are your training wheels? What helps? What helps your system? Please continue, Elizabeth.
Well, and being on a call, whatever is happening here, which I don't even know what's happening here on this call, and listening about beingness connects me with that bike of beingness. So I'm riding the bike when I'm being with you all with beingness.
Nice. Lovely. How do we find that as we're together? We're about to end this time together. We had the 8 of us, this connectedness. How is that a training wheel? How does that support you? This is when Dick Schwartz is such a proponent of this with IFS, being together in community to help us, like a training wheel, help us know beingness together, to sink into it, to dive in, to know beingness, to have a sense of more of an ownership or identification with or as it. Notice, how did we help each other? How did being together? And again, what are the best training wheels for each of us? And I'm so bummed because I wish we had time. I'd like to go around and hear about everybody's experience with their training wheels. To do that another time. It's really, we've never gone there before until Elizabeth brought that up. Well, it's closing time. And to just also share that we created a Facebook group. Well, most of you have heard that. If you're ever had something going on that you're wanting to share or just be involved in dialogue, it's called the IFS Non-Dual Community, and it's hosted by me and another IFS person called Laura Petraeus, and we've got a lot of IFS people in there, or non-dual folks and IFS people. And welcome there anytime. And such a pleasure to be with you today. Thank you for the gifts. Lastly, thank you for the gifts you offered us. If you can hear that for each of us, the gifts of you, the gifts of how life is moving through you, their parts, the self, as we kind of co-created this together through each of our sharings. I just had the privilege of being your facilitator. Thank you. Hope you'll come back again soon and have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Thanks, Sid.
Thank you, Sid.
Sid.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Nice meeting you all.